I forgot I have to cut all that music out. I don't want to get sued. Welcome back to another edition of an uninformed person taking offense at a really interesting magazine, the Army AUSA magazine. It's free online, but if you're a member like I am, they send it directly to your door. And if you're someone who likes tactile feel, that's the way to go to read it. The article I wanted to read out loud is something that I thought of not doing. That has to do with that gender equality, and that's been so hot button, and it's so divisive that I wasn't really. I was excited to to piss people off, but I wasn't excited to necessarily jump on that bandwagon, especially with concerning military service. I don't think we're asking the right questions. To me, it's not an issue of do you deserve to serve or do you deserve to die for your country. Personally speaking, I think everyone has an inalienable right to die for your country, and so I think females should be entitled to do whatever they want, but the standards should never change. And it's shown that the standards are changing, and they're changing a lot in order to make sure certain numbers are being met. So this article is written by Major Alex Bedard, Major Robert Pete Peterson, and Ray Coach Barone. It's written by three men, which I think is funny too, because it's an article about women in the military. It's written by three men, and I think that's part of the problem with integrating women into combat roles is the men are doing everything, and I question the level of involvement of senior female officers in making these decisions to reduce or modify standards to ensure female safety. I've talked to a few women about, and again, anecdotal evidence doesn't mean shit, I could be lying. I've talked to a few women about whether or not females should fight, and they all agreed they should, but standards should not be modified at all. And, I think any decent person can get behind meritocracy, right? So, this particular article is about the boxing program at Westpoint. It says, female cadets integrate into mandatory boxing at Westpoint. The modern Army Combatives program teaches hand-to-hand combative skills for the Army and has greatly increased close quarters combat training and proficiency. They lay that out there and they just say, hey, the Army's deadlier in hand-to-hand combat. But what I would have liked to have seen is maybe some citations of an increased survivability, statistically speaking, or some contemporary hand-to-hand engagements that turned out pretty well due to our hyper-focus on grappling. With inclusion into professional military education and widespread official tournaments, the program has also improved the warrior ethos, confidence, and lethality of our force. Excuse me. Although striking is part of the program's curriculum, its focus remains on grappling skills due to risk mitigation factors. Unrestricted striking, like that in the sport of boxing, is typically reserved for more advanced combatives, training, and competition. For over a century, the boxing program at the U.S. Military Academy has successfully trained cadets in boxing through a deliberate risk mitigation process, balancing safety and realism while meeting training objectives. That's not new or unique to the program. Anytime you want to train, you obviously are going to need a risk analysis and cost-benefit analysis of what you're trying to do, and then find a middle road that isn't extremely dangerous, but also accomplishes what you have set out to do. The Academy recently conducted gender integration of the boxing program, requiring all cadets to complete boxing to graduate, removing one of the last existing gender barriers in the U.S. Army. This unique requirement offers many benefits that are not fully realized through combatives. Commanders, NCOs, and Master Combatives trainers throughout the Army can improve their combatives programs by learning about the boxing risk mitigation process used at Westpoint and how the program was adjusted to accommodate both genders. And there it is, right there. We're changing the way things are done in order to support the integration of the other sex. Because there are performance differences with men and females. And instead of acknowledging the fact that females are going to have a different landscape in war, we are going to put kid gloves on them. We're going to wrap them in bubble tape and make sure they don't get hurt. Pisses me off. This training can continue to improve the combat readiness of the Army for all genders. The boxing program at Westpoint has been continually refined and adapted to balance meeting training objectives while ensuring the safety of cadets. The course is taught through 19 blocks of instruction lasting 50 minutes each. Cadets are evaluated in one-on-one, full contact graded bouts consisting of 2 rounds that last a minute each. Fear factor. Boxing at Westpoint is the only mandatory activity that pits one cadet against another in full body contact. It reaches fear management, which is a necessary skill to lead soldiers in the crucible of ground combat. Now, if the only experience with fear management an officer had coming to a line platoon is he boxed someone, I would be very afraid of the welfare of my men. And maybe that makes a lot of sense. Looking back on some of the lieutenants I interacted with, maybe it does make sense. I wouldn't like that, though. I would want, I'd potentially want to spend the money elsewhere and maybe do something else other than boxing. I understand Westpoint has a tradition with boxing, but if one of your training objectives is to elicit a fear response, there are far better ways to do that outside of boxing, which is a sport, something that people voluntarily do every day, and they don't really get afraid. Boxing at Westpoint is the only mandatory. Okay, well, it teaches fear management, which is a necessary skill to lead soldiers in the crucible of ground combat. Striking to the head, like in boxing, increases the perceived threat of physical harm. This invokes a strong psychological and physiological response from participants similar to that experienced in ground combat. The fear response in boxing is much greater than the fear associated with ground combatives, where one can simply tap and quit when placed in a fearful or uncomfortable position. Now, maybe people do combatives differently. I mean, I know there's different levels, but striking, and you know, the clinch drills you do in OSUT, you know, that involves striking. And combatives training, to some extent, always involves striking, and I feel like it's not as calm as this person thinks it is, especially if you're doing the training with your battalion combatives instructor. They're usually pretty rough. It's usually can be a pretty harrowing time. If you're like me, and most guys have 20 to 50 pounds on you, you know, it can be a good time of getting thrown around by big burly men. In boxing, there's no opportunity to tap out against an overbearing and aggressive opponent. So, you know, apparently they're playing by prison rules, And if you clinch or fall over or do anything that usually breaks up a boxing match, they will just allow it to continue, and to include just pummeling the back of your head when you're passed out. Like, this is hardcore shit. Through boxing, cadets learn to manage fear and perform physically despite the presence of these stressors, a quality that is necessary for combat leadership. Women were first admitted to Westpoint in 1976. Concerns over gender differences resulted in women initially having to complete a self-defense course in lieu of boxing. The requirement for women changed over the years into a comparable combatives class. Westpoint made the historic decision to integrate the boxing requirement in the summer of 2016, conducting a deliberate review of risk management policies and procedures. Existing Army doctrine, however, provided limited guidance, because you're supposed to have enough logic and common sense to be able to use existing Army doctrine as a groundwork to go off of situational shit. You don't need everything spelled out for you. Safety first. The primary concern with gender and integration of boxing is that women appear to experience concussions at a greater rate than men. So, once again, people openly acknowledge that women do not perform at the level that men do. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think, you should approach being a combat soldier, being an operator, with the full acceptance that you're at a greater risk being a woman. Now, you may love your country enough to where you're okay with that, but to expect the institution or your fellow men to protect you from the nature of the job so that you can continue to do it is bullshit. And ultimately, it's a disservice to women, especially when they actually go to war and they're facing 200-pound Russians who don't give a shit that you're a woman, and they will bayonet you, shoot you, or gang rape you, do whatever they like. But you're used to playing with a handicap, and they're not. So, like I said, ultimately, this coddling of our fairer gender is a severe disservice, in my opinion. I think women could rise to the male standard. I think they could. A minority, but I think they could. And we lower the bar, and I think that's pretty shitty of us to do. This may be a result of physiological differences between men and women. On average, women also have less muscle mass than men of comparable weight. Boxing, like combatives, is a weight category sport. Matching men and women according to weight may not adequately account for gender differences regarding striking force. Gosh darn it. Men and women are different, but we want women to be able to fucking fly through this course with little trouble. A detailed and multifaceted risk management program is adhered to at Westpoint to ensure cadets meet boxing program objectives while providing a safe yet authentic environment. I don't know what they mean by authentic when it comes to boxing. Do they got the white canvas tarp out over the boxing ring? Is there a lot of cigar smoke when you have your rounds? Is there a big handlebarred mustache referee to break things up? I don't know what authentic boxing is, but apparently it triggers a lot of fear in people. So I might need to take authentic boxing and put that on my resume and move on from there. Fucking lost my place. Before they can box, cadets must complete a pre-participation medical questionnaire screened by medical providers. Whenever there is boxing training, medical personnel provide constant support and assistance. Hand wraps are used to prevent hand fractures and wrist sprains. Fitted mouthpieces are worn to guard against dental injuries. And headgear is worn to prevent cuts, abrasions to the face and forehead. So, to me, this isn't authentic boxing already. And you talk about head blows, triggering a fight or flight response, a genuine fear response. Your head's wrapped in marshmallow padding. To me, this is going to provide a great sense of security. Um, Whereas combatives, I mean, yeah, they have pads depending on what level you're at, but a lot of line companies, I don't think, break out pads for regular combative drills. They usually just go at it in the PT field, right? Boxers must also wear gloves, which primarily serve to prevent hand injuries. Heavier gloves are also believed to reduce punch acceleration, limiting the amount of force a boxer can generate. Boxers therefore wear gloves according to body weight. And this is where it gets good. Men weighing 175 pounds and less wear 16-ounce gloves and make sure I read that correctly. Yeah, male cadets 175 pounds and less wearing 16-ounce gloves, and male cadets over 175 pounds wearing 20-ounce gloves. As a general policy, women wear 14-ounce gloves. However, instructors monitor females and increase the weight of the gloves for certain skilled boxers if it's warranted. So no matter how much you weigh, you're always going to wear a lighter glove and be able to hit harder than men because you have a pussy. I think that's really, like I said, a genuine disservice for women, but you're also really disrupting the military, I think. Cadets are closely monitored. Aside from medical screening and protective equipment, instructors phase and control activities to further minimize injuries. Now, this is so typical military. It's fucking boxing. And they make it sound like fucking space travel. And I know the amount of man hours and salary that goes into all the risk management, making sure that you have 600 EMT qualified medics on hand is just staggering. But kind of reminds me why I got out of the uniformed services. Cadets are first taught punches in segments without an opponent. Segments are gradually reduced until cadets are performing full movements in formation or mirrors. Gotta do your dry run first. Gotta do your dry run. Once technique is improved to an acceptable level of proficiency, cadets find a partner within 10 pounds of their own weight for partner drills. Instructors use verbal commands to control the volume of punches thrown, the defenses used, the tempo, and most importantly, the intensity. As cadets become more proficient... Now I want to pause something. In my entire career, doing hand-to-hand combat, combatives, defensive tactics, whatever you want to call it, if it is some sort of melee, right? And your instructor said, well, only 10%. I've never found that to be the case. Every time I've trained or practiced, it's always been 110%. And I don't feel like the people, I have history practicing with can fucking not go 110% because that's the type of personality they have. So I don't know if this is really the case, if they really do gradually increment the intensity, or if that type A ferocious personality that I'm accustomed to is usually present at Westpoint, and they go all out almost no matter what. As cadets become more proficient, instructors increase the intensity and reduce the predictability of the drills. Trainers seek to maintain an inverse relationship between the intensity and the volume of punches, minimizing exposure at higher intensities. Finally, cadets may be pitted against each other in free sparring, which introduces the greatest amount of complexity, although instructors closely supervise all sparring through issuing verbal commands. During free sparring, control is reduced. Trainers continually assess cadets' proficiency throughout instruction. Cadets are rated on a 1 to 5 point Likert type scale. with a 1 designating an internationally competitive boxer and a 5 indicating a boxer so overcome with fear they can't participate. Instructors then match cadets according to skill level, body weight within 10 pounds, gender, and aggression. This ensures that sparring contributes to attaining course objectives and limits injury risk. Oh yeah, limits injury risk. Okay. Cadets must box someone of the same gender. When conducting partner drills, however, cadets can work with a cadet of the opposite gender. Instructors continually monitor activities to ensure suitable matchups. See, this is the bullshit I'm fucking talking about. This is allegedly to enhance your toolbox, your skills of hand-to-hand combat. You may get into a striking situation with an enemy combatant. An enemy combatant which almost guaranteed to be a man. A very angry man. Now, if it's in the Middle East, sure, he might be $150, right? But if it's, God forbid, someone from a Western country or a Slavic country, he's going to be a lot heavier. And Slavic countries, doing martial arts is about as popular as it is here. It's a recreational sport, and most of their militaries teach it in some way or form. So when you allege that this program at Westpoint is not some masturbation for gender equality, and it's actually to improve your combat skills, it's to add lethality to you as a person, as a weapon, but at the same time you restrict who you fight against, because we don't want women to get blown the fuck out constantly in a combative scenario. We need to either face the reality and the adversity that women will be faced with in an actual war, or we need to keep them the fuck out of the combat branches. Sorry. That's my opinion. I think that we should acknowledge the added risk and not coddle these fucking people. I mean, I honestly think how I would feel if I was a woman, and all I wanted to do is be in the infantry, right, for whatever reason, because I love my country. And the day finally came, right, when I could be in the infantry, and people said, or the army said, well, you're a fucking bitch and you can't do shit right, so we're gonna basically push you through ranger school. We're gonna amend the entire PT test, and we're gonna make up some excuse to amend it, make it easier for you to get in. And we're overall just going to make exceptions for you because you're fucking worthless in a variety of capacities. But politically speaking, it's really good for us to have gender equality. Whether you get your entire company slaughtered, it's up to you. But we're not going to hold you accountable or expect you to perform to the standards that have been in place for decades, for as long as this country has been, around. We've expected our infantry men, to push themselves beyond their limits, but now, mediocrity is okay, I guess, and it's a telling and very disturbing trend within the armed forces, and I'm not really quite sure what the long-term impacts of that are. I think I have to look at some of our near-peer adversaries and what they're doing with female integration and what their current readiness looks like. Honestly, if you want to keep the standards low for women, that's fine. Give them their own unit, all female infantry unit. Now, it's kind of odd to me that hasn't even been tried or referenced or suggested through any sort of official channels. Maybe it has. maybe they had an infantry battalion full of females and it wasn't that great. I don't know. But it seems like we immediately went to full integration, which, is fine if that's the route we chose. But I would rather have a all-female infantry unit. I think I know why they don't want an all-female infantry unit, but is because of the disparity in performance. And also, I was thinking about this, and I think this is the golden answer. If you have a mixed gender company run a platoon-sized cop, and they're isolated, that cop gets overrun, and 15 prisoners are taken. Everyone else is killed. How many of those prisoners are women? 4, right? 5. And those women are gang raped. They are sexually tortured and then eventually beheaded, right? Okay. That's really bad press for us. But if that was an all-female infantry unit, that's 15 women prisoned and raped, sexually tortured, and beheaded. No one really gives a shit if a dude gets beheaded. We've been so desensitized to it that it's just kind of part of the process with interacting with Islamic fundamentalism. Yeah, and I did say Islamic fundamentalism on purpose. I think it's important to group people who are fundamentalists in with the terrorists. I think to say Islamic terror is not all-encompassing enough. I think if you're a fundie of anything, you're a douchebag, because it implies you don't respect other people's cultures, religions, or societies, and that you have some sort of casus belli or divine right to spread, proselytize, or force your beliefs on other people. So I don't like fundamentalists. I specifically don't like Islamic fundamentalists. But I think that's the answer why we don't have all-female infantry units. Is potential performance problems. But the big one is the risk of that unit getting ambushed, killed, kidnapped, or imprisoned, and the ensuing media fiasco / political fiasco of the all sorts of sordid and despicable acts that could be wrought against them, and the unique risks they face in a hostage situation because they're female. And we have all this risk analysis to prevent their little soft skulls from getting crushed in boxing, but we don't risk mitigate when it comes to the war part. We're avoidant of that risk. And if you've taken any risk analysis training, being risk avoidant is not good. It's not effective, and it's not conducive to running any sort of operation or unit. So I think it's flawed. I think the idea is flawed. I think we're being biased towards women in our attempt to help them. And the reality is, war fucking is brutal. Life is unfair, and war is especially unfair. Now, if every time something unfair happened, the world stopped, time would literally never pass, right? Was it unfair for, a jihadist to get caught in a cordon and search in Baghdad and shot in his bunk? Sure. But shit like that happened all the time. There was plenty of instances where jihadists or insurgents were outnumbered and surrounded by coalition forces and utterly annihilated. So the fuck what? It's war. Shit's unfair. And honestly, all tactics and strategy is to ensure that you continue to have unfair fights. You ask me, do you want to fight 50 insurgents at once, or do you want to fight 5 insurgents at a time? I'd be like, give me 5. Give me the small or the biggest number I can kill without taking any casualties. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to shed my own blood. I just want to massacre as many of these ridiculous villains as possible. I want to industrialize the killing of Islamic terrorists. I would put them through a fucking meat grinder if I could and skip the fighting. I don't think they're worth my time. I don't think they're worth anyone's time. And the better we are at killing them off, the better the world will be. I digress completely from what we were talking about. The main point was the world's fucking unfair. And the more we try and shelter female soldiers, particularly female infantry persons, um, you know, the bigger the consequences we might potentially have to cash in on later in life. And so far as having to having to police your language as an infantryman to be inclusive of soldiers, I think that's stupid. We've had a storied history of plenty of masculine songs, and we are infantrymen. And, you know, I feel like any level-headed woman who really wants to be in the infantry wouldn't mind being called an infantryman. We don't need to rebrand everything or stop singing certain cadences or change our patches or our symbology to make them feel at home, because at the end of the day, when they are assaulting a hill or living in a foxhole or shitting in a slit trench, they're not going to feel at home. So to me, there's no point in trying to cater or mold an institution that's older than they are around every new fuck that comes in. So the infantry, and the military did not change for me when I was in, and I don't really expect it to change for anyone else. I adapted to my environment, and I think that's more effective than trying to identify every little. I don't want to say snowflake because that's overused, but every unique soul out there, and making sure they're perfectly accommodated. So the military is a life of inconveniences, and it's better to get used to it now instead of later. A budget of boxing is where we were. Cost is always a factor when considering training objectives. Fortunately, most units possess modern Army combative program kits containing boxing gloves and headgear. A lack of punching bags is often cited as a concern. Bag work, however, is discouraged in favor of partner drills, as bags fail to improve defensive and offensive skills. Excuse me, I'm going through puberty. A boxing ring is another cost issue, as many commercially available rings start at about 2.5 grand. Free sparring should only occur in a regulation boxing ring for safety concerns. However, many benefits of boxing training can be gained through partner drills alone. Again, I'm going to point out that that's not going to be the reality. And if you're boxing for sport, fine, fight in a fucking ring. But if you're boxing, again, to put on these airs and allege to me that you're improving your combative technique, then fight fucking in places that are irregular and that are asymmetric. Train how you fight, right? I'm not saying that boxing rings are inappropriate for someone who's potentially looking to use boxing in a lethal or non-lethal manner, in a manner that's aggressive towards another human being. But I think to always keep your hand-to-hand combat in a very clinical setting is short-sighted. I don't think it's good. I think you should try to do kind of both, because you will be able to improve upon technique, I think, more in a clinical setting. But so far as getting used to the idea that your fight may not be fair and it may not be in the most opportune position, I think you should explore that and get your soldiers used to the idea of fighting or grappling with multiple attackers, or in a variety of different environments. So, off the top of my head, I want to say that a lot of the more recent hand-to-hand combat situations in Afghanistan took place in actual houses. So, it's a higher risk, obviously, to be like, hey, let's go brawl in the barracks. But there are unique limitations and risks when you're fighting in a room. So, I'm not saying that that should be your primary location for training hand-to-hand combat, but I don't necessarily agree that you should never fight outside a ring. A boxing ring may not be necessary to initially introduce and integrate boxing training into a combatives program. Hand wraps and fitted mouthpiece should be individually purchased due to hygienic concerns and are readily available for under $10. All units can benefit from incorporating boxing style training into their combatives program. I feel like there's probably jiu-jitsu dudes out here who would freak out about this article, or I don't know, some other sort of strike-oriented martial arts program. Doing so will increase the ability of soldiers to control their fear in stressful situations and improve confidence, warrior ethos, resilience, and proficiency in hand-to-hand combative encounters. When incorporating striking into combatives training, however, commanders must ensure there are qualified instructors and medical support. A deliberate risk management process must also be enforced. If conducting strike training with soldiers of both genders, policies must account for the physiological differences between men and women, and to ensure to give the women the handicap they need to perform just as well as men. I extrapolated a little bit there, but that was the point they were trying to drive home, is that they want to keep the women safe. They want to keep the female performance on par with men, so make sure to handicap them appropriately. Gender integration is not simply a movement to one standard. It requires deliberate thought and constant evaluation to ensure women don't get hurt and they're able to perform at the male level due to the fucking numerous handicaps they have. When done properly, striking can and should be incorporated into a unit's training program, increasing the combat readiness and lethality of our army. I don't know any unit that doesn't incorporate striking into their combatives, because every line battalion, and I'm pretty sure this goes for the dudes who think that they're combat arms, the MPs and shit. Everyone has a fucking combatives instructor, and yeah, to my knowledge, striking in some way has always been a part of the combatives training. Whether your unit sees fit to explore that regularly is obviously up to the discretion of your commanders. But yeah, I think, in a stressful or a duress situation, a lot of people will they will grapple, but their instinct will be to strike, to just bash, right? So I think it is something to explore. Anyway, that was the end of the article, and it was very depressing. And I don't think we're moving in a positive direction with our integration of females. Despite not thinking integration of females is a bad thing, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I don't think we're handling it properly at all, and I think the way we're handling it could easily become a net negative instead of simply unlocking a population of the United States who previously couldn't jump on that sword along with us. Because frankly, I'm all for other people getting killed. For the longest time, it's been just men, and for the most part, a lot of the men come from certain areas and are certain people, vast majority of them. So hey, you want to get shot, you want to get blown up by IEDs, you want to get vaporized by an EFP, fucking cool, man. Let's do that. Let's make sure that happens. I think initially there might be some females who want the promotion potential that comes with having a combat MOS, and I've encountered dumber reasons to be in the infantry or to be wherever, to include I was high when I walked into the recruiters, or whatever the excuse is. So while I disagree with joining the combat arms for a shitty reason like that, it's going to happen, and hopefully those women will be weeded out. And I think the best thing people who are actually who are not policymakers can do are highlight and elevate the females who perform at the actual male level. Um, because people need to know that women can perform that high. Now, hey, go find your unicorn, man. I'm sure they're out there. Uh, and that's why I said when you do find them, elevate that, put it on blast, so we can restore our standards to a singular, unified combat standard that will ensure our success in future engagements with scummy Islamic fundies and potentially our geopolitical enemies for whatever reason. They hacked our serial or whatever. So, but overall, there's my disappointment on the matter. Hopefully, you enjoy. It was not as shitty of an article, but the content was shitty, and there's not really a better way to write that. It read dry. It was a very dry article, and it really didn't surprise me to see it was written by a bunch of officers. It read like it was officer food. So anyway, that is it. And despite all my rantings and ravings, AUSA magazines are pretty interesting, and it allows you to keep up with military affairs and stuff like that. So cool. Highly recommend it, and I'll see you next time.